Lots more on that story and lots more stories on the BBC Sport Africa website. Luquesa, back to you.
On the BBC News Africa page, there's lots of stories as well.
Lots indeed. Yes, there is.
That's it from Mimi and I. You can find us on social media at Mimosa Fawaz, and I'm at Luquesa Buret. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Live from London, this is BBC News. At least 8 people are killed during violence in Pakistan sparked by a corruption case against the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Here in the UK, the publisher of the Mirror newspaper has apologised to Prince Harry for unlawful information gathering during a trial over alleged phone hacking. In an exclusive interview with the BBC, the then editor of the Mirror newspaper, Piers Morgan, denies any knowledge of unlawful activity. And we have a special report from the front line in Ukraine. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale witnesses firsthand the battle for the city of Bakhmut. Hello, I'm James Reynolds. Welcome to the programme. We begin in Pakistan, where the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been remanded in custody for 8 days after his arrest on corruption charges. His detention has sparked protests across the country. At least 8 people have died in clashes. A conviction would disqualify Mr. Khan from standing for election. Our Pakistan correspondent Caroline Davis has been monitoring the day's events from Islamabad, and she sent us this report. Yola Nell in Jerusalem, thank you so much for joining us. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
How do royals stay relevant in the 21st century?
What could the monarchy do better than the government?
Catty Kay goes in search of Europe's royals.
Royal families, they're complicated.
To find out if it's possible to maintain a distance but not separate from those you represent.
Your Highness?
Tell me how you would like me to address you.
You know, Your Highness or Princess or just Martha, I don't mind.
Okay.
Europe's royals revealed on BBC News.
You're live with BBC News. We turn to Ukraine now and the battle for Bakhmut. 9 months after launching its assault, Russian forces have still not managed to capture the city from Ukraine. It's been the longest and bloodiest battle of the war so far, but Ukrainian forces are holding out on the western edges of the city. Each side has suffered heavy casualties. Reporting from the area is extremely dangerous. A video journalist working for the French news agency AFP was killed this week in rocket fire in a town just to the west of the city. Our team, defence correspondent Jonathan Beale and camera crew Lee Durant, travelled to the front line of the battle, and they sent this special report.
Elections.
Professor Craig Green, thank you so much for joining us. Just want to keep you up to date with events in Gaza. We want to show you the pictures coming out of Gaza as conflict has continued between the Islamic militant group Islamic Jihad and the Israeli Defense Forces. This is the scene tonight in crowded Gaza City. Do stay with us here on BBC News. This is BBC News, the headlines. At least 8 people are killed during violence in Pakistan sparked by a corruption case against the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Palestinian militants fire hundreds of rockets and mortars into Israel following a wave of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. A campaign has been launched to solve the cases of 22 unidentified murdered women in Europe. Welcome back. We return to Pakistan now, where the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been remanded in custody for 8 days after his arrest on charges of corruption. His detention has sparked protests across the country. At least 8 people have died in clashes. Any conviction would disqualify Mr. Khan from standing for election. Well, in the last hour or so, Pakistan's Prime Minister Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif addressed the nation and criticised Imran Khan, who he described as Imran Niazi, and blamed him for the recent spate of violence. Stephen Kavanagh, Executive Director of Police Services at Interpol, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
You're a raver.
Do I look like a raver?
I've got bass in a backpack. This is amazing.
Dancing for like 4 or 5 hours of a gig, you could generate about 800 kilowatt hours of thermal energy.
Right, so shall we give it a taste then? It's my favourite.
We're really talking to the plants and they're telling us how happy they are.
It can fly, but it can also float on water.
Oh my God, that came by quick.
It's all about augmented reality.
Beautiful, right? Beautiful.
Totally and utterly immersed in another world there.
Your Tech Update. Click on BBC News.
You're live with BBC News. We turn to Iran next, where it's been reported that 3 more prisoners have been executed early this morning, bringing the number of executions to more than 50 in less than 2 weeks. The Norway-based Iran Human Rights Group said the prisoners were put to death after being found guilty of drug offences. On Tuesday, the Human Rights Chief Volker Turk expressed dismay at what he called the frighteningly high number of executions so far this year in Iran. Well, let's go to Oslo now, where we can speak to Mahmoud Amiri Moghadam, the director of the NGO Iran Human Rights. Thanks so much for joining us. When you look at these executions, are they all for drugs-related crimes? Does this show a different pattern from Iran's use of executions in recent years? Dr. Beatfrey, thank you so much for joining us to tell us more, well, to tell us something new for me about plastic-eating microbes. Plenty more stories on our website. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Live from London, this is BBC News. At least 8 people have been killed during violence in Pakistan sparked by a corruption case against the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Here in the UK, the publisher of the Mirror newspaper has apologised to Prince Harry for unlawful information gathering during a trial over alleged phone hacking. The conflict between Israel and Palestinian factions rages on. Palestinian militants fire hundreds of rockets across the border into Israel following a wave of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Finally, Liverpool calling. The second round of hopefuls will be battling it out for a place in the coveted Eurovision final this weekend. Welcome to the programme. We begin this edition in Pakistan, where the former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been remanded in custody for 8 days after his arrest on corruption charges. His detention has sparked protests across the country. At least 8 people have died in clashes. A conviction would disqualify Mr. Khan from standing for election. Our Pakistan correspondent Caroline Davis has been monitoring the day's events from Islamabad. She sent us this report. Dr. Farzana Sheikh, Associate Fellow at Chatham House, thank you so much for joining us. The Israeli military, says it's striking rocket launch sites in Gaza as tensions escalate. And as the military says that, I want to take you to the United Nations in New York, where the Palestinian ambassador Riyad Mansour is speaking. Palestine is an observer state at the United Nations. Let's listen.
And in every part of the occupied Palestinian territory, and definitely we need them to stop their aggressions and attacks against our people in the besieged Gaza Strip, as we have seen since, the early hours of yesterday.
That's the United Nations there in New York, where the Palestinian ambassador, Riyad Mansour, has been addressing reporters. Palestine is an observer state, and he was also followed there by the ambassadors of Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. In the last few minutes as well, it's very important for us to mention to you that Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has delivered a statement of his own in Hebrew. He was accompanied by the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, and the latest update on figures we have for you is that, according to the Israeli military, over 300 rockets were fired by Palestinian militant groups from the territory of Gaza. There were 4 direct hits on buildings and structures inside Israel, and that rocket fire and Israeli airstrikes has been continuing in the past few minutes. That's according to our correspondent Yolan Nell, who is in Jerusalem. And as those rocket strikes continue, just to reiterate that those tensions have been escalating, a day after Israeli airstrikes killed 15 people in the Palestinian enclave, the army says that it's targeting the rocket launching infrastructure of the Islamic Jihad militant group. Palestinian sources say at least one person has been killed and others seriously wounded in the latest conflict. Our correspondent Yolan Nell, who's brought us right up to date with information in the last few minutes, has been monitoring the day's events. Right, this year's Eurovision Song Contest will be held on Saturday in Liverpool. Let's join my colleague Mariam Moshiri, who's been monitoring the semi-finals. Mariam, which of the country's song entries has got you singing along?
Well, James, I love all the entries. They're all amazing. But one of my favourites, and one of the big favourites I'm sure this year, is Italy. And Marco Mengoni is the singer of the song. It's called Due Vite, which means 2 lives. Have a quick listen to it, James.
Anche Mariam parla italiano.
Sì, veramente parlo, però non voglio parlare adesso. Siamo un canale inglese.
No, she speaks very well Italian. Better than me.
Well, if Marco's looking for someone to duet with, Mariam there, with her Italian, is ready to sing Due Vite in Liverpool on Saturday, a late entry. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Well, it's been a day of sunny spells and some heavy showers. Certainly the skies look very dark and threatening.
Your favourite radio show is now available on BBC News. So join me, Nikki Campbell, for the nation's phone-in, talking about the big topics of the day, giving you a voice. No judgment, just honesty. Nikki Campbell, weekdays at 9 on BBC News. Watch on iPlayer.
This is BBC News, the headlines. At least 8 people are killed during violence in Pakistan sparked by a corruption case against the former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Palestinian militants fire hundreds of rockets and mortars into Israel following a wave of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. And a campaign has been launched to solve the cases of 22 unidentified murdered women in Europe. You thought we were done with the Eurovision Song Contest? We are not done with it. We've only just begun. A few minutes ago, we slightly broke into a tiny bit of Italian as we spoke. Mariam Moshiri, I beg your pardon, spoke to Italy's entry to the contest, Marco Mengoni. What, though, is Eurovision without its many ardent fans who come outside, regardless of wind, rain, sun or shine, for more of the buzz from the fans? Let's cross to my colleague Lakshmi Gokal in the Eurovision village. Lakshmi, all yours.
Hello, James. Well, you've had Italian. Now meet the Swedish ladies. Hello, and just for a bit of gender balance, here's Jonathan. Come on in, Jonathan. Don't be shy, don't be shy. So we've got the Swedish ladies, unsurprisingly from James.
Lakshmi, thanks so much. I've got that song on CD. We're going to give you some breaking news now coming out of the United States as we keep an eye on a number of legal cases facing a number of figures. The first story we're going to bring you is the US Republican Congressman George Santos, who was only elected in November. You can see him there in the glasses, has pled not guilty to federal fraud and money laundering, theft and false statement charges. That's according to a court hearing. And we will keep you across that. He's been a controversial figure in the United States since he took office in January, but he is an important figure to the Republican Party, given the very narrow majority that his party, the Republicans, have in the House of Representatives. A baby has been born for the first time using three people's genetics, according to the UK's fertility regulator. Most of the DNA comes from the two parents, and around 0.1% comes from a female donor. The pioneering technique is trying to prevent children from inheriting rare genetic disorders, as our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, explains. Stephen Kavanagh there from Interpol. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. To Ukraine now and the battle for Bakhmut. 9 months after launching its assault, Russia has still not managed to capture the city. It has been the longest and bloodiest battle of the war so far. But Ukrainian forces are holding out on the western edge of the city. Each side has suffered heavy casualties. Reporting from this area is extremely dangerous. A video journalist working for the French news agency AFP was killed this week in rocket fire in a town just west of the city. Our team, defence correspondent Jonathan Beale and camera crew Lee Durant, travelled to the front line of the battle and sent this special report. And you can read more on Jonathan Beale's experiences in eastern Ukraine by going to our website and having a look at the article that he and Lee Durant have written. And also you'll see tributes which have been paid to Armand Soldin, the 32-year-old French journalist who was killed whilst reporting from the war zone in eastern Ukraine. President Macron said we share the pain of his loved ones and his colleagues. You're watching BBC News. To Iran next, where it's being reported that 7 more prisoners were executed on Wednesday, bringing the number of executions to more than 50 in less than 2 weeks. The Norway-based Iran Human Rights Group said the prisoners were put to death after being found guilty of drugs offences. On Tuesday, the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk expressed dismay at what he called the frighteningly high number of executions so far this year in Iran. The director of the NGO, Iran Human Rights, Mahmoud Amiri Moghadam, spoke to me earlier from Oslo with his reaction to the news. Plastic-eating microbes, they're coming, as is the weather with Chris.
Hello there. Well, it's been a day of sunny spells and some heavy showers. Certainly the skies look very dark and threatening